Hey, thank you. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Thank you for making time in your very busy time of year to come to this Wednesday webinette. As usual, I'll chat for the first 10 minutes or so, and then we'll open up the floor for a Q&A and sharing. And so this topic I found particularly interesting. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I had part one. This is part two. Part three is coming. And so I'm really curious I really enjoyed getting into the literature for this one. And I'm curious to hear really what interested you in coming here today to be part of this and to see what you're doing in your courses as well. So my name is Anita Parker. I'm one of the educational developers at the Center for Teaching and Learning. And our topic today is supporting competence in an online course. I've put an article together that pretty closely follows the speaking notes that I have for you today. And I want to give you a bit.ly so it's easy. You just jot it down and have a look at it later. It's a PDF article with the references that I went to bring you this information today. And then, of course, my contact information's on there. So if you'd like to continue this conversation afterwards, you can reach out to me directly from that. This will become a video on our CTL website in a week or two after this presentation. And so this bit.ly will now be part of that video as well. So competence is the quality or state of having sufficient knowledge, skill, or strength to accomplish a task. Merriam-Webster definition of what it means to have competence in something. Perceived competence is a little bit different. It's a person's belief or their self-efficacy about their ability to do something. It's that feeling of, I've got this, or I am able to do this. For a university student, a task, the perceived competence about a task could be an individual activity or an assessment, or it could really even be a whole course in general. Students with high levels of perceived competence are known to have a higher level of intrinsic motivation. This can lead to more positive learning outcomes, and it also can translate into a student's increase in effort that they put into a course, into their persistence throughout a 14, 15, 17-week term, and in general, their outlook about their future potential and their successes. So it's nice if students have a high level of perceived competence. Alternatively, if students have a low level of perceived competence, here's the list: ineffectiveness, shame, anxiety, and powerlessness. And instead of persevering a low level of perceived competence, students are more inclined to procrastinate instead of persevere throughout a course. So that list is just not as good as the one before. Competence and confidence are related, and ideally it's a linear relationship. As your competence goes up, so does your confidence, and the two can play off of each other. You can see there's also the zones of overconfidence and overcautious. So the ideal zone is there in the middle, and I have a reference for you that in my reference screen, and also in that article as well. It's referenced. So I like that graph. This was present in my last presentation last month on autonomy. This is the theory of self-determination. According to the SDT, we have, every human, students, instructors, everybody has three basic psychological needs. On the left is autonomy. That was the September webinette. That's a sense of responsibility and choice in your personal circumstances. The one in the middle, where we're at today, is competence, which is a sense of mastery over things that we think are important or things that are important to us. And the one on the right, this will be a November webinette, is relatedness, a sense of belonging and connectedness with others. So next month, we'll get chatting about building this community in your online course. When all three of these needs are met, it can result in increased intrinsic motivation, and self-directedness in a course. So my interest in bringing you this 3-part series this fall is because I really feel like these 3 needs connect to the design and the implementation, not of all university courses, but in particular the online courses, because instructors and students aren't together in the same time and place. So, again, in all courses, competence relates to discipline-specific knowledge and skills, but the online aspect goes a bit further. It relates to the student's ability and attitudes towards their use of the digital tools for learning. So there's a competence aspect of that as well. You can support students' level of competence, both their actual competence and their perceived competence. And we went through the literature and I organized it into 3 different categories. I'll go through the 3 categories. I have a few examples for you, but then again, at the end, I want to hear what your thoughts are and what kinds of things you do around these ideas. Number 1, well-organized, consistent course design and implementation. Number 2, appropriately challenging activities and assessments. And number 3 is formative assessments and formative feedback. So let's go through each of these. Number 1, a well-organized, consistent course design and implementation. Your LMS, learning management site, your eClass site, it is the classroom in an online course. It's this virtual space where you and the students come together throughout a term. It's the portal for all of your course elements, your communications, your content, your activities, assessments, etc. When your classroom is well organized, students can have increased feelings of familiarity, comfort, and confidence. Again, they'll feel more like they know what's going on. They know what they're doing. And it also means that the cognitive load required for basic navigation, finding things, figure out what is going on, that's much less, if at all, and students are spending their mental energy on more meaningful tasks. So here's a list of considerations in your course design, in your classroom setup. Your font, the fonts that you use, the type, the size, the color, the ones you use in your headings are always consistent, in your subheadings are consistent, in the descriptive text that you use, as well as the naming conventions. What you call things in eClass matches the syllabus, it matches the gradebook, it matches what you call them when you're talking to students out loud or in an announcement forum, etc. How you order your artifacts or your learning materials, like your readings, your quizzes, your videos, etc. And scheduling, the scheduling, yes, of the actual classes, but also due dates or your office hours. You have consistency in the scheduling week to week. The unfolding of a unit of learning, whether that's a week or a module or however you organize your course, each one of them feels the same, that they unfold in relatively similar manner. And class routines, both the synchronous ones when you're together and the asynchronous ones, they look and feel consistent throughout a course. And because online learning has all the digital tool aspect, you have some helpful resources that the students might need about how to use the tools, maybe their tutorials or articles, etc. So some ideas for your course design and the implementation. That's number 1. Number 2, appropriately challenging activities and assessment is another way that you can support student competence in your online course. And let's underpin it with this thought. Learning is uncomfortable. And I'm going to bring in 3 authors or three points of view on this. And the first one is Massey et al., some neuroscientists who quantitatively have shown that we learn best when faced with uncertainty, or when we're in an uncertain environment. And when we're in a nice, stable environment, our brain activity actually decreases. So that third bullet, that could be really important in your relaxation time. Nice to be in a stable environment so you can, let your brain recover. But the learning happens when we aren't in such stable environments. So that's Massey et al. Let's have a look at Vygotsky. Vygotsky says that learning happens within the zone of proximal development. This is the zone where, with guidance from an MKO, a more knowledgeable other, that's you, that's where learning happens with students. It doesn't happen on the left with things that are too easy, and it may or may not happen on the right where things are too hard and guidance doesn't even help. So where is that zone of proximal development in the challenge, the activities and assessments that you provide? One more, Dweck. Dweck, you're approaching learning with a growth mindset. Learning is uncomfortable, and we know that if we want to learn, we want to feel like effort is required. Failure is definitely a possibility, as is receiving feedback from others, integrating that feedback, and implementing it in our future actions. So with Massey, Vygotsky, and Dweck in mind, we want to give students a reasonable degree of uncertainty. We want to look at our assessments and activities and ask if they are in that zone of proximal development. It's a bit of a Goldilocks kind of a zone, and that we are encouraging our students to have this growth mindset in order to succeed. Of course, what is appropriately challenging is highly contextual. It can depend on a course discipline, a year of a program, the individual and the collective characteristics of a student group. You have your own insight as to what is a challenging activity. You know your students, what is challenging for them, but maybe you need some other inputs. Maybe some formative assessments will give you information about the challenging aspect of what you're asking students to do. Maybe speaking with colleagues, previous student work, and just asking students themselves. This can be part of one of those stop, start, continue surveys that you might have throughout a term, just checking in with students to see how where they are in their zone, their Vygotsky zones. All right, so that was number 2. I'll recap these at the end. Number 3 is the formative assessments and the formative feedback. So formative assessments, not summative, but formative. Formative ones are those that provide information to students, to you, about their learning and progress in a course. They are opportunities for students to practice, learn from mistakes, and to receive that support, that guidance that they need in the development of their knowledge and their skills. So the feedback, the information that comes from the formative assessments needs to be timely, relevant, and meaningful. And when students have that feedback, it gives them an opportunity, it gives them evidence, and it gives them an opportunity to take ownership of their learning and to take action toward their continued growth and development toward their goals. So I'm going to give you 2 examples of formative assessments. A 2-stage quiz, low stakes, and it has 2 stages. Stage 1, the students do the quiz individually. Stage 2, right after, they gather with some peers and they have the same quiz or a similar version of the quiz, and they do it together. They discuss the options, they choose an answer together, and then it culminates in a whole class debrief with the instructor, and that's an opportunity for the instructor to address misconceptions, misunderstandings there. So the assessment itself is the quiz, but the feedback is the students' great mark on the actual quiz, their individual, maybe their group mark as well. That dialogue that they have with their peers. I think it's this answer. No, I think it's this answer. Why do you think that is? There is such good learning that happens in that dialogue. And then again, feedback comes from the instructor as the activity is debriefed. So that's one example of a formative assessment to help build students' perceived competence or actual competence as well. How about this one? A scaffolded assignment, a big one, an end of the term summative assessment that has been scaffolded along the way. It's been preceded by a series of formative tasks, such as if this was, for example, a big research paper, maybe there was a proposal or an abstract or an outline, a first draft, a second draft, handed in at some points along the way. And so the final product is going to be so much better by having those ingredients along the way. The formative feedback is, yes, it can be comments from you, the instructor, on these small pieces leading up to it, but also lots of opportunities for peer discussion, peer evaluation at those milestones along the way. So again, the 3 ways that you can support competence, both perceived and actual, is through the course that you design and deliver, how you unfold the course throughout the term, the level, that nice zone where you have the activities and assessments, and thinking formative, thinking that these information pieces, these pieces of evidence along the way are really important for supporting competence.